Diss tracks. If there's one place you want to make sure your lyricism is solid, it's on these. But a lot of the time, that doesn't happen. To be fair, it is pretty hard to make a track that's consistently great with every single bar connecting, but for today we're ignoring that, singling out the mistakes and pointing at them and going, haha, that was a bad line. This is CDTVProductions, and let's take a look at the 10 worst lyrics ever from hip-hop diss tracks. Okay, so apparently Ja Rule deliberately misspelled the name of his own label here just to avoid making a statement that would incriminate him. And somehow that apparent justification makes the line even worse. Do you really think law enforcement would just ignore this line if, for example, 50 Cent got shot after this track dropped, just because you misspelled murder? This is a tough case to solve right here. This is our #1 suspect, but nowhere on this track does he reference murdering 50 Cent. He says something about murder, but I don't know what that is. Not to mention, I'm pretty sure that defense is just an excuse, and a pretty poor one at that, as Ja openly refers to shooting and killing people later on in this very same track. I don't think spelling murder wrong was a way to protect himself. All I wanna know is why they picking on me, why they picking on me, stop picking on me. I wish this was some sort of joke or meme, but that's actually the hook to a diss track. A hook where Jaquan begs Odd Future and Pusha T to stop picking on him. He's whining on a diss track. Hot New Hip Hop, how much did Jaquan pay you for you to say that this is a worthy addition to the impressive body of work Jaquan has been developing over the years? I hope he gave you a fat amount of money to say that.
Hey, somebody grab him some clippers. His fucking beard is weird.
I'm not even gonna ask you guys to keep your CDTV has a weird beard haha comments to yourself, because I know they're coming no matter what I do. But honestly, I don't think this line would even be half as bad, and I probably wouldn't even put it on this list if it wasn't the very first opening line on Rap Devil. It's the context that makes this one so poor. He decided to open it up by insulting Eminem's beard, and not even in a creative way. It's one of the most lackluster opening lines I've heard to a diss track. A lot of people say this line is a reference to a certain Eminem line on his song Business, but I highly doubt that. I've just never bought that because it's such a reach in my opinion. It's just a very poor insult to start the track with. You were sweeter than a lemon, man. Sweeter than a lemon. There is not a lot that's sweet about that. You're basically complimenting Bow Wow, saying, damn, you aren't sweet in the slightest, so you know what? You're actually a pretty tough guy, Bow Wow. That's what this line says. You guys know I praise Soulja all the time. I'm so happy that he's free, but even the highest powers need to be corrected sometimes.
Guy, you come off so fucking weird. It's 2019, just admit that you're queer. I don't.
Tom likes to bring up age a whole lot in this diss track, so let me do the same for him here. This is a 30-year-old man, an age at which science says your brain has fully developed, making a joke where the punchline is literally, haha, gay. It genuinely couldn't be more uncreative and immature. And it's not even like it's a single line, you know, just one little throwaway filler line. He used a bar to set it up and then a bar for the punchline. And are we just gonna kind of forget that you mentioned that Mac has a daughter earlier on in this exact same song? Kind of contradicting this line completely. If you're gonna call him gay, maybe don't mention that he was so attracted to a particular woman to the point of conceiving a child with her earlier on in your diss. It basically renders this diss as a childish insult that's thrown around in playgrounds, being used by a grown man.
Cops are killing people with their arms up, and your main focus is trying to harm us?
Okay, bit more heavy content on this one, but this line just seems really unnecessary to me. Suggesting that Meek shouldn't call you out or diss you, well, you're dissing him I might add, because there's bigger issues going on in the world, isn't really a relevant point. A, just because you drop a diss track or diss another rapper it doesn't mean that you're doing nothing to counter something like police brutality in real life. B, Meek made a track months before this song came out addressing his issues with the law and law enforcement, using his platform to speak out on these issues. The way Drake delivers it makes it sound like he's trying to get people on his side, but really it's just a weak and cheap attempt at discrediting Meek.
All I hear is platinum that, platinum this. Meanwhile, I'm on the carpet with a platinum chick. I got a platinum rollie, platinum whip.
Hello?
Hi, I forgot to come back. We're outside. I can hear you.
Oh.
We're recording, so I don't want to just barge in.
Right. So this was a clapback in response to Drake saying that Meek had trouble going gold in terms of sales. And Meek's response was essentially, yeah, I do. Showing that you have expensive items and at the time a girlfriend who made platinum records before you doesn't really prove to Drake that more people know about or like your music, which is the point of the trouble going gold line. Sure, Meek is showing that he has money here regardless of sales, but Drake was calling Meek's relevancy into question, not his net worth.
You said my name so much they think you being honest. It's more than that. We could have recorded a track. You could give me a stack for a verse just like that.
Yep. Cannabis dissed J. Cole because J. Cole said he was a big fan of Cannabis, but never reached out to him for a collab. Apparently paying homage isn't enough anymore, you literally have to pay your idols in cash or else you don't respect them. And of course, Cannabis thought these bars were so good that he stood behind them for all of 2 days before rescinding the track and apologizing for it. That's how you know it belongs on a list like this.
Kendrick Lamar, where's your last name, rap bastard? You got 2 first names, your mama was ass backwards.
You know Kendrick Lamar is just his stage name, right? It's like saying, oh, Papoose, where... I can't say his name without it sounding weird. It's like saying, oh, Papoose, where's your last name? Why don't you have one, huh? This would be, I guess, a decent bar if it was true, but Lamar isn't legitimately Kendrick's last name. It's Duckworth. His middle name is Lamar. I'm assuming he chose to go by Kendrick Lamar because Kendrick Duckworth doesn't quite have the same ring to it. But the lesson here is to make sure you know what you're saying about your opponent before you say it and put it into a diss track.
She was absent, I automatic ass. Waited 4 days, my where you been? Came here in the Rari playing Little Kim. Don't know what made you think that you could with Rem, but I guess this is what I gotta do to make y'all spit.
Now, I loved Remy Ma's Sheether diss track, but when she dropped this one, it just sounded like she was desperate for a response. And those bars where she tried to flip what Drake said to Meek Mill in Back to Back are evident of that. In this case, it isn't even half as effective, and here's why it worked when Drake said it. Meek had already called Drake out by name. The beef wasn't subliminal at that point. Drake and Meek were both all in, so Drake dropped Charged Up as a warm-up, you know, just like some light jabs, some light shots at Meek, and then dropped Back to Back as the main event, asking Meek why he hadn't responded yet if he supposedly wants beef. In Remy's case, she dropped her version of the main event first. Not to mention, she was responding almost entirely to subliminals, so both parties weren't even all in at this point, like they were with Drake and Meek. Remy dropped Sheether, which contains some huge blows against Nicki, but she didn't leave herself any content for the second, unnecessary diss track, which dropped just 4 days after the first one. In my opinion, it was a failed attempt to recreate Back to Back, and because of that, the lyrics just fall apart and kind of make it look like a parody of that song. Not ideal for a diss track. Well guys, that's going to be it for the video today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, I would appreciate you leaving a like, of course, and subscribing if you want to see content similar to this. Also, make sure you turn on that notification bell if you haven't already. I can see it's not on yet. Turn on those notifications. And remember as well, if you want to see all of my videos early, all you have to do is tap that join button next to the subscribe button down below, and you can become a channel member. It means you get to see every single video early, on top of some other perks. So that's all I got to say for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all in the next one. And this is CDTV Productions, signing out.